turn that on. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being patient. I'm just going to set up a couple more things real fast. Cool. The monitoring's coming through pretty well. So let me check a couple more things, and I will be ready to start right away. So cool. I'm just pulling up my other screen to monitor real fast. Cool, okay, we're good to go. All right, nice. All right, cool, so welcome. So this is going to be procedural coding in Touch Designer. And I've done a few of these streams, but in case you're not aware of what Touch Designer is, hold on. I'm going to mute myself real fast. Okay, now I'm good to go. Finally. All right. So I've done a few of these streams in the past, and this is kind of an intro to Touch Designer and kind of a walkthrough of some of the things it's capable of. If you ask anyone, they'll tell you I'm a big Touch Designer evangelist. I'm a big proponent of it. I think it can do a lot of really interesting things in a lot of different ways. So I'm always super excited to kind of talk with everyone and kind of showcase some of the stuff you can do inside of Touch Designer. And I thought what the kind of stream, the direction the stream would kind of take today is that we would look at 3 kind of bigger projects I've made. They're a little more involved. I might have to fix a few things, like a few things may be broken because I moved them to the streaming computer, but we can do that in real time and kind of talk about the exciting Touch Designer file linking system and how it's going to work. But I want to give you kind of a little bit of a grounding to get started, and this is kind of what Touch Designer will look like the first time you open it. And basically what you're working on is you're working on this big endless canvas that you can kind of zoom in and out of. By default, you notice that we're inside a container. This one's called Project 1. And containers are basically your files or hierarchical structures inside of Touch Designer. So you can kind of cram anything in it if you want. We could take this whole thing and put it inside another container if we wanted to. So we could like grab all these nodes and just drop them in here, copy into container 1. But just kind of how we're set up is that we each have these blocks of really code called nodes. And each one of these codes you could think of kind of like a function or a method. Basically, it's doing something. And then all the parameters for it are here on the side. So Touch Designer is what I would call a visual coding language or a node-based coding language or node-based coding environment. Where basically instead of using type for characters to tell the computer what to do, you're using these nodes, which is a nice visual way of interpreting programs or writing programs. And I do both. Like I code in Python, and then I also do in Touch Designer. I use Python inside of Touch Designer, which we can show later. But it is a different way of working. And if you're working with something visual, and Touch Designer is very visual focused, you're kind of making these cool graphics, I guess you could say. But it's a good way to kind of look at everything, see it laid out in front of you, see what's affecting what, and kind of take it in as a glance. So I don't think you should use Touch Designer for all coding projects. Some of them would be very rough, I think, inside this program. But anytime you're making a visual, something that has a big visual component, I think it's worth a look if you're doing something interesting. And Touch Designer's main use case in industry is this kind of visual workflow. Touch Designer is also very good at interfacing between lots of other programs. It's very easy to pipe data and information into Touch Designer and then do something to that data and then output it somewhere else. So like as an example, let's say you have a big data set that you're using, a big data set that you've collected that's like showing like the average rainfall in the United States. And you can take that data and you can output it maybe to a bitmap image where, black is 0 inches of rainfall and white is whatever the maximum amount of rainfall was that year. And then you normalize it between 0 and 1, 0 being black, 1 being white. So you have this map, and then you can output that map into a program like a game engine, like something like Unreal, and then you can animate it, right, based on what you're getting in from Touch Designer. Like if the data is changing in real time, you could connect it with an API. You could pipe it through Touch Designer, kind of massage the data how you want, and then output it via something like OSC to get that data looking really nice in a dedicated graphics environment like Unreal Engine. So there's just a lot of cool things you can do with Touch Designer, and I'm always excited to kind of talk about it and kind of walk through some of these things. Like I said, I think some of my stuff will be broken, but we'll kind of talk through as we go, and I'll kind of show you what we're doing. I think I'm going to do it differently. In the past, I've gotten people excited, for Touch Designer content, and I've gotten, started off with cool stuff. I think I'm going to take a little bit of a backseat to that. If you're tuning in on YouTube after the stream, feel free to skip ahead if you know the basics of Touch Designer. But I think there is some value in kind of showing the environment and what it looks like, so you're not totally lost when I pull up this big network and show all the connections in between. So I've already mentioned that Touch Designer is a node-based coding language or coding environment where you've got different classes, I guess you could say, of nodes that you work with, and all of these are called ops or operators. And they have these nice catchy names. Like here we have tops. Let me make sure that these are showing up on the stream. Sometimes this counts as a pop-up, so sometimes based on how I set my OBS, yeah, they're there. Based on how I set my OBS settings, sometimes it doesn't catch it. Okay, so you have tops, chops, sops, mats, stats, custom, if you want to build your own, and then comps. And so we'll start with the first two, the ops. Tops are texture operators. This is anything that involves 2D graphics. So bitmap images are going to kind of lie here. And things that work with 2D graphics. Whoops, let's get this out of here for now. Chops are channel operators. So anything that comes in as channel data. So you see, you've got a ton of audio options through here, and Touch Designer is very good at working with audio and making things audio reactive. But there's also lots of other kind of chop data in here. So if you want to interpret things like MIDI, you can pipe it in here. If you want to, let me see if I've got some alphabet, HIJK. If you've got connect, you can actually pipe in connect skeletal tracking data through channels and get it in that way. And then all kinds of other stuff can come in as channel data too. It's kind of just a stream of data coming in, can go to chops. SOPs is shape operator or solid operators, I'm not sure. Basically, this is anything that involving 3D space. So Touch Designer is also a 3D rendering engine, and you can do things like render out cubes and 3D environments, inside of Touch Designer. So you're not just limited to 2D visual elements. You also have a full 3D workflow up in here, and those are under SOPs. We get to mats, which aren't used very often, but they're used in conjunction mainly with SOPs, the shape operators. Mats are your material, what do we call them? Material attributes? Mat. Operators, mats. I think they're also operators, they just call them that because it sounds better, mats and dats. So these are just basically textures. So you'll notice that if you're familiar with texture language and texture shading information, that you've got some familiar phases in here. You have your Phong shader, you have a PBR shader, GLSL if you want to write your own shader inside of Touch Designer, you totally can do that. I want to get into more GLSL coding, but it's a shader coding is an intense thing. I didn't realize it before I got into it, but something I want to look into more. And then, also things like constants, which is just a flat texture information, no lighting applied. So you've got your mats, and they're just material operators. And then your DATs, which are your data operators. And then this is basically where you're inputting scripts, you're inputting code, you're inputting data sets, databases. If you're working with Touch Designer for data science, which a lot of people do, to kind of make these real-time data visualizations, you're going to be working with DATs heavily. If you want to pull things from the web, if you want to pull things from an API, you have your JSON operators in here, like There's all kinds of things that you can do with DATs, and if you get more into the higher end of Touch Designer, DATs are kind of where you're going to gravitate towards, especially if you're using it for data visualization. So just know that these exist, and they're pretty good. Also, lots of times if you're streaming anything into Touch Designer, you've got your UDP in and out, the UDP protocols. There's more streaming protocols in here too. You can very easily transfer data via, transfer protocols like from anything. So like phone data can be transferred via DATs, OSC in and out. I use OSC a lot for any time I'm transferring data. So your DATs are in here too. And then we roll it back to the start, and these are comps, which are not technically operators. They work a little bit differently, but basically these are built-in tools that Touch Designer has kind of built out of other ops. And I'll kind of see if I can show what that looks like. So if you had a camera, basically what the camera does is looks at your 3D scene as a whole. And right now we just have a cube floating in space, and that's about it. But I believe you can go inside. Yep, you can go inside the camera operator, and then you see that there's stuff actually in here. Right now it's just referencing a geometry file for things like that. But all of the comps are actually composites of other nodes that have been created as presets. So they're kind of like a built-in library Touch Designer gives you to kind of get started working inside of Touch Designer here. And these are also very important. Like the ones that are here, like I say that like they're built for Touch Designer, but like there are many things you could not do without the aid of comps. Lots of interactive things need to run through comps, lots of pre-built things like buttons, sliders, tables. If you're rendering anything, you need cameras and lights. If you're animating anything, you need the bone comps. And then geometry comp you will use all the time if you are doing any kind of 3D work. So just know that the comps are also extremely important, the ones we have. Touch Designer also has, let me see if I can pull this down real fast. Usually performance palette browser. Yeah, there's also a palette over here that you can use. And these are pre-built things that have been created. They're almost like full projects that have been created by Derivative, the company that makes Touch Designer over here, to basically make things easier. So things like TDVR can use things like OpenXR, utilities built in, and they built them in for you, so that if you want to do some work with OpenXR inside of Touch Designer, you can kind of grab it from the palette. So I can like pull down from here. So let's see, like tools, TDVR. One second. World objects, yeah, things like joystick scripts. Not really what I'm looking for though. I might have moved it. Yeah, like if say you want to interface with like an Oculus device or something like that, you can just pull these out and then start working. And Touch Designer is very modal. It's very apologies if I take breaks in between remembering things. I have a new 3-month-old at home who is learning to sleep, so sometimes it just takes a second for things to come in. But Touch Designer is very it's a word where things easily fit together. I shouldn't be blanking on it, but I am. But it's very easy to snap components together and reuse components and take them modular is what I was thinking. Modular. It's very modular. All these nodes could be bundled into a container. That container could be supplied with an out. Let me just go in here real fast. So an out node. And then basically if you have this out node, you notice that, or maybe you don't, let me throw another one in here. You notice that now you can output information from this container. And this is very useful when you're creating anything that needs multiple parts, because you can put any number of nodes inside a container, bundle them up, expose certain parameters out of here, just so that you can only see certain things, and then you can use these outputs, to build your network. So it's very easy to just compact down blocks of code, move them where you need them, and then pull them in any project you want. I've done this for a lot of things. If I have a MIDI controller or something like that I'm using, I can build in the full MIDI map, the MIDI functionality I want, and then I can just bundle it up into a container. You can export them. Let's see over here. let's see, might be because it's empty right now, but you can export them as talk components, talks files. By default, a Touch Designer standard file is going to be a TOE file, but you can export just these individual nodes as a TOX file. Yeah, I think it's just because it's empty, but I don't get the option to do so. Can I export this one? Yeah, save component talks. Yeah, just because that one's empty, there's nothing in it, so it's like, why would you save this? But it's very modular. It's very easy to move your code around. It's very easy to do this kind of coding. Just a few things. If you're interested in coding in Python inside of Touch Designer, you can run scripts from the text on here, and you can like just file run. You have your full text port over here, where you can see print to the console. Touch Designer, the language, it's not built on top of Python, but the language is the scripting language it's running is Python. So if you're familiar with Python, you can use that immediately inside of Touch Designer. Split this left, right. Okay, and you can output stuff to your console here. You can write scripts here, like there's things that we might get into today if we want to mess with it, but in the DATs there are things called chop executes. Oops, misspelled it. Chop execute, you just grab it, which are basically like like scripts that are running continuously, like loops that are running continuously that will check your channel operators every every frame that it's running as the timeline goes, and then we'll update if certain things happen. So you can think of them kind of like events inside of Touch Designer. And then there's ones for chops, there's ones for parameters. If some parameter changes, what other executes do we have? Oh yeah, operator executes. If something about the operator just changes in the entire system as a whole, you can write your own executes if you want. I mainly use chop and parameter executes when I work, like at my low level, but you can get deeper into those as well. So in that way, it's really interesting how you can kind of combine all the native like visual coding elements of Touch Designer, with just the Python that you're writing in between, and you can kind of use them interchangeably to make some really cool stuff. Let me get rid of this panel real fast. Over here, we just want to close this. There we go. So I thought I would take a second. Let me talk a little bit more about like how you link up stuff. I'm going to delete this real fast. We'll just start with a blank scene. So, and then how you get all these nodes and make them work together, now that we've kind of run through the operators, is that you have to find basically what you're looking for. So let's start with maybe like a noise node, just to get some visual information in here. And you'll notice that we have fields on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. And basically, if you hover over them, if it's an input, it's gonna see it's gonna like give you a prompt for what it wants. So a background image or a noise coordinate map. We're not gonna worry about these too much, but you can also receive an output from it, which is kind of how you chain your network together. So if I were to apply, like say, a level node to this noise, I can take that and suddenly adjust the brightness and contrast of what came before. And it doesn't have to be noise, right? It can be anything. So I could do movie file in. If you have any kind of image input, movie, 2D, just standard bitmap, a GIF, anything, and it'll come in a movie file in. So same thing, take the brightness, move it way down, it'll save those parameters. So if I swapped it out with this node, they're both going to be dark. And then you can kind of make these changes to your network in that way. So you're linking things up. What you'll find is that you cannot link different parameters to each other, just kind of natively. But there are ways around this. So like, let's see. I don't know. So like this just won't work in general because like how are you going to delay a bitmap? But if I try to put it in here, you're going to see that it just disappears because you cannot connect on operators. And it's very good about showing you that because everything's color coordinated. So you'll never try to plug like a cube, a box inside of Touch Designer. Sorry. You'll never try to like plug a box, into this noise network because it doesn't make sense. It needs 2D input. So just keep in mind that these are all color coordinated, and generally they don't kind of cross into each other's networks. Now, there is a way around that, in that you can export any of these things into the other operators. So like, let's say, I'm trying to export this banana. So I'm clicking and dragging. If you click and drag and hit tab, which is how I keep bringing up this menu, you see that I can grab from all of these, and it's going to only by default show the ones that it will actually work with. Some of these it won't work. Some of these are only looking for input, like from an outside source. You can't put anything in them, like you can't pipe a 2D image into the Connect Azure input stream. That just has to come straight from the Connect. But if you go to Chop, you have info, which will just tell you facts about your node, like the resolution, things like that, the memory using. But you can also, output it as a top 2. And what that's going to do is it's going to take that texture data, pixel by pixel, and it's going to export it basically to channel data. And then it's going to represent it as R, G, B, and A channels. And what you're going to see, yeah, so right now it's showing them row by row. So if you look at it, it's basically sampling the size of each. It's a little more yellow. Let's turn the brightness back up. Doesn't matter too much because you're seeing it's just clamping it as you go. This is actually super interesting that you can kind of take a look at the channel data of a banana. So you notice that most of the things on the left and the right are blank because there's nothing there. There's no pixel information. There's just you can tell that on the alpha. Alpha 0, nothing there. Alpha 1, it's no longer transparent. So you can see that it's not registering this on the sides because there's no banana there. And then it's basically taking the pixel value of each of these rows, and you notice that we are in rows right now. If we went pixels, let me see if I can do all of them. Sometimes you can get the entire map in one. Oh yeah, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. You can basically break it down by all the rows and all the columns simultaneously and see all that data across. So anything can be exported to channel data. And this works the other way too. Let's take a noise. You can convert anything to anything else, right? So let's take a noise chop. And this is doing something similar to this bitmap, except it's doing it as a waveform. So this is just random, kind of noise that you've generated. You can take that and you can output that as a chop 2. And then basically what you're getting, because you only have these one individual strings across it, is you're getting a 1 pixel wide value range that's been normalized between 0 and 1. So you get some black ones here where it's low, you get white parts where it's high, it's over 0. You can also modify this. Hold on. Let's normalize it a little bit. Math. Normalizing, I just mean take the value and turn it into something else. So right now we have kind of values between maybe -1 and +1. We can map these to 0 to 1, instead. So now if you output it, it's going to look different because we've changed the level, basically changed the levels on it. And now you see that you have a lot more white, a lot more gray, very few black parts because it's not really dripping down to 0, 0 on this noise. You can see, but you basically converted it, from one to the other. Let me say custom resolution. No, it's not going to like that because it needs to have it. Okay. And then you can use this basically as a texture operator. In fact, if you looked at the thing at the beginning, it was taking a noise output and turning it into a texture to generate the wave displacement. So it's just very useful to know in Touch Designer that these things work easily together and you can modify them. I'm not going to get into individual nodes right now because a lot of them are very useful. A lot of them are very niche, cases. I do think the best way to learn Touch Designer is learn a few nodes and then kind of get really good at messing with the parameters inside of them. But something to talk about, I guess we could do. Let me get rid of this stuff. Let's just go back to our noise node and kind of talk about the parameters. So we saw that with the levels adjustment a little bit. I'm going to make this bigger. Oops. 1280 by 720. Okay. Make this bigger. And I'm going to kind of showcase how these different parameters work. So by default, you're going to have different sections that you can modify. And if you want to toggle this parameters menu, just hit P on your keyboard. It'll bring it up and down. You have different selections you can make with them. Common is almost always the same, like depending on what operator you're in. Like almost all the top common operators are the same, that's why they're common. But basically you're setting the resolution and pixel interpolation, things like that. But the important ones are the ones before that. So noise, basically you have all the different parameters that you can use to modify how your noise is displayed. So if you turn your harmonics up, you're going to get a much grainier noise. If you turn your exponent up, you're going to get less variation between the two. If you turn it down, it's going to get very stark. Very, very stark contrast between black and white. Amplitude, you're going to increase your values and again get kind of that stark contrast, but it's going to have more of a stepping look. I don't know if you can see here, but you kind of got a middle gray in between as well. And then you can also modify that like here. Offset is just going to take it up or down in one direction while still trying to preserve, the parameters you put in before. Monochrome, whether it's black or white or grayscale or RGB. If at any time you want to reset your parameters, you can just come over to the node itself, right click, and you can say reset all parameters and it will take you back where you started. If you want to just reset individual parameters, you can always click on this and just hit reset parameter by clicking on it. Also, handy node I didn't know existed, or I keep forgetting exists. If you toggle this up at the top, it's going to show just the parameters that you've changed. And this is a very good way of finding like what's changed quickly, when you kind of need to get back into your projects. But yeah, seeds, period, kind of how large the noise appears, harmonics, we'll talk about the grain, fidelity, harmonic spread, the size of that grain that you're creating, harmonic gain, like how much is that contrast inside the harmonic noise. All right, cool. So I think we're just going to reset this. Then you have other fields in here. So you have like the translates with noise. This is kind of, oops, let's do one at a time. So if you want to modify a field in Touch Designer, of course you can just pump in the value, which is always fine to do, and I do very often. But sometimes you want to kind of see what the change you make is looking like as it tracks. So you can, if you click and hold on one field, if you click on the name of the field, it will modify all of the parameters at once. So you see right here, we're scrolling across, everything's going up by one. If you click on the individual field and then hit the same thing, you're going to see that this is easier to see, and you're going to only move this in the x-axis. So X, Y, Z is true here, moving in the y-axis. And the z-axis is interesting for noise, not to get into it too much, but you're actually going to kind of like move forward into the noise. You're going to think of it as like 3D space, you're going like into it. So like you notice it's like kind of moving through a cloud. It just kind of like moves, not really randomly, but like in this kind of weird pattern where it kind of builds on itself. So very cool to see. You can use Python scripting inside of the parameters at any time. You notice all of them have this little plus next to it. If you click that and then say you want to write a script inside here, you can. So I can put in abs time.seconds, and that's just a simple script that's going to look at the absolute time since you started this. There's nowhere that's tracking it on here, but once you do it, you can see. Yeah, so since we have started basically this Touch Designer session, we have passed 17,742 seconds, and it's going to keep going up, and you can see that it's modified on the timeline. This is very useful actually because you can sync all of your stuff together to one timeline if you want to. So like if I made another noise node, these are going to be perfectly in tandem, because they're both set to abs time.seconds. They're both going to be running at the exact same one. If I did this differently, like times, or just +1, +5, now there's going to be a 5-second offset between the two, and now they will no longer be in sync. And then of course you can basically write full Python in here, so any expression or anything you want. You could even write like a loop in here if you wanted to. I'm not sure why you would, but it would be cool to see. So you can write full Python inside of here. If you are interested in the coding aspect, I'll keep it short because not everyone is. If you're calling a Touch Designer operator like we go, they always use the same convention. So it's going to be op, parentheses, and you're going to write a string because you're going to input the name of the operator in here. So if I wanted to call this, I'd say noise2, or let's actually call noise1 because we can use the input from noise1 to control noise2. Noise1, and then if you have a specific parameter that you want to reference, because right now it's not going to do anything. It's going to be like, what is going on? I can't do anything just with the entire operator. That's too much. That's too much, man. But if you say you wanted to reference like a certain parameter, so like you could say harmonics in here, you'll notice that if you click on here, you get a little name that says harmon. And then that basically is the name of the parameter that you're going to call inside of Python. So like you can basically look, it's kind of like it's got its own documentation built in where you can reference it. So like let's say I want to grab, let's say the harmonics. So I want to grab this harmon. So what I'm going to do is put in dot par to show we have a parameter, and that parameter is harmon. So now that works because it's referencing basically this is serving as your variable and referencing. And if you change the harmonics on this, it's going to change both of them simultaneously. So watch this one. You know, as it gets grainier, this one's going to translate. You know, like you see. And this is good. I don't know if you can like think of the implications, but this gets very cool very quickly because you are basically have the option to connecting anything in Touch Designer anywhere, you know, at any time. And like all of it can control all the parameters. It can just be piped directly in. It's a very cool piece of software, I guess I should say. It's very easy to use too. And it runs completely in real time. So as you do this, you know, you can see it updated in front of you. You don't have to, you know, like validate the code and then run it each time. There's like no delay in between. It's all just running in front of you all the time. You don't have to render anything. But as such, you know, there are limits. Like Touch Designer is limited to the power of your computer. If you have a better computer, like all real-time things, you can run more inside of Touch Designer. There are things like particle instances, and when you get to geometry, you know, you can only run so high geometry loads, only so many points and vertices. But it's very cool and very good at what it does. It gives you instantaneous feedback all the time, which is very good, very great. So from here, I thought we'd kind of get started into trying to bring in a project that I'd done into Touch Designer. And like I said, I may need to fix these. My apologies. Projects to stream, that's me. So, let's start. Let's see if I can get the screen sample experiments running up first, because this is just a good idea, a good showcase of a practical project you could do inside of Touch Designer. Let me see. No, we will not save it. So I'm just going to give it a sec. All right, cool. This one might be working, actually. I just want to see. Oh, yep, our connect's running in. Cool, cool. Container looks like it's working. Oh, I don't care about the probe. We are good to go, I think. So let's see. If I hit this, does it run? That's cool. No, not quite like I want it. I think this actually node has changed since I last saw it. 1 second here, I just want to get my variants. So basically what this is using, just as an introduction to this project, is basically we're using a whole lot of channel data to sample depth data coming in from a connect, which I do have a connect connected right up here. You'll notice that kind of what a depth camera does is it's using a pattern of infrared light just kind of splayed out as a grid, and it can look at the displacement of that light, you know, as it beams it through space. It gets reflected back into the camera, into the sensor, and then it can tell how far away objects are. It actually looks like this room is pretty good for this, like the feed's not too bad or noisy. But you'll notice this is kind of what the raw feed looks like. You know, we get a lot of static where I can't tell, but everything close is pretty good. I've keyed out basically all the background values that are over a certain amount. And you'll notice right here, if I go too far back, I will slip away into the background. But if I come back in, you know, you can see me up in here. And then what this will do is that basically the further away I get, the wider I become, and then the closer I get, the darker I become. And I can use these values in order to tell how far away I am from the camera, right? So like darker, close, white, further back until I hit the cutoff, and this is basically just to mask out all the stuff behind me so the camera doesn't get confused. So basically, until I hit the limit I set for myself, and then I can come back in. And I can extend that limit, right? Like I don't have to just stick there. Like that's within the RGB key. Like I've got my max set to 0.9. I could set it down something like further out. I think it's across all of them though, yeah. Hold on a second. I don't think this is the most efficient way to do this, but. So basically what I've done is I've extended how far back I can go, although it's hard to tell. Like I can go back further now. And basically you use this to just mask out the background, so it's like, not like this. You can also smooth out your feed with a blur function. And this is good if you're getting like a lot of like, you know, jagged noise around the edge, but I don't think it matters too much. This is the bypass key in Touch Designer, or the bypass button. If at any time you want to take one of your nodes out of the mix and just kind of pipe straight through, just click bypass and it will take it out. So again, just a very good visual way of kind of working with the stuff you're making, you know, to get it working. Okay, so my container, I think, yeah, because I have a movie player input, so OP trigger. And I don't need this probe. Let's get rid of it. Yep. All right, that should help. Okay, so let's see if this is still working. But basically what I'm doing is that I've put up some buttons inside of here, and that this is what's going to be displayed. I was wondering if, no, we'll just use it on this one. So let's see. Yep. And then basically what you're using is I'm just using the screen space UVs. I think all I need to change is the output actually. So you'll notice if I'm back here, nothing happens, right? And this could be good in like an exhibit or a museum kind of sense. Let me make this larger. 1 second. Okay. Let's get this out of the way for a second. Yeah, here we go. This could be good for like an exhibit or like a museum sense. Like let's say you have a video, you know, set up and you want it to play when someone walks in front of it. I'm coming in on the Connect right now, so I'll make sure I'm looking at that instead of my webcam. But basically, you know, you have a lot of background noise, so you can't just only trigger it when someone walks in front of it. You use the depth feed, basically, so that when someone comes right up to it, then you can say, okay, now that someone's right in front of me, you know, it got close enough. But now that someone's right in front of me, they can, you know, track where the position is. And when they do that, they can make a change, you know, but if they move too far back, I'm masked out, you know, I'm not affecting that value anymore. So now, like basically, I can walk up to the exhibit, I can see myself maybe on the monitor, like interacting with it. I'm like, oh yeah, play video here, let's see. Oh, okay. You know, like now we've gotten to the point where now I can watch the video, like that's coming up on the screen, and I'm only doing that by coming up to the depth camera and being like, yeah, and then we can turn it off if we want. And you notice there's some more commands that are written into it. There's like holds, you notice there's like kind of this little brief highlight if you're over it, but it doesn't play it straight away, you know, so like it doesn't just trigger like if someone just like walks by, you know, or is moving their head. It's only if you kind of hold it, and all these, you know, values can be tweaked. So like we can turn that on or off, move that up here, take that off. And basically what you have now is you have a like a hover reactive setup that you're working in. And you could do this for anything, right? You could make like a panel of buttons on the bottom, you could advance text, and you're doing it all by just working in the air. And in Touch Designer, it's not very hard to set up. I mean, like I think it's much easier to set up than if you just coded it from scratch. You know, like if you like wrote like a Python app or something like that. It's pretty easy to get it started. And I kind of want to dive into like how this works and what's making it work. And the number one thing, let me see if I can grab it. I think it's inside this container actually. Is something called a panel chop. Make sure. Yeah, I think it is outside. And basically what this panel shop is doing is it's set to a component, in this case project 1. And basically what it's giving you is it's giving you a bunch of channels to kind of mess around in. And what's really important about it is that you can look at specific channels, you know, like on the screen. So as I roll my mouse around, I can see that it's looking at something called screen space UVs. And what is that? UV coordinates are similar to XY grid coordinates, you know, except because you actually have a XY space to work in, you need something else for the texture that's applied across the screen. And that's where UVs come in. So UVs can be used in such a way that basically it normalizes the size and resolution of your screen. So if you have a 1280 monitor or a 1960 monitor or a 4K monitor, your UVs will always be the same because they'll be 0 on this side and 1 on this side. And even for the vertical, it'll still be 0 to 1, 0 to 1. So they're normalized. So basically the idea is that something should be the same if it's in the same UV space, regardless of how big or small your screen is. Obviously, it will change some if, like, your aspect ratio changes, but it will be in generally the same spot. You don't have to set it to a pixel value. You can set it to a screen space UV value. And what I've done is I've set up this so that the panel chop is exposing a screen space UV value that's right here, basically located right here on the screen. And then at that point, that pixel is being sampled, and it's saying, okay, and then this is done inside of this container, so we can move over here. So that pixel is being sampled. And it's done so on this in. This is basically my connect depth feed. You notice that we're converting it basically a top to chop. So we're turning this into a channel data. And now, let's see if I can make it. You'll notice that when I put any kind of value over it, and it has to be on the connect. So if I move back, nothing's going to happen because there's no value. But if I move forward, you'll notice that whenever I track over these buttons, you can see I'm doing it up here, you'll notice that the value changes because now there is some component there. And you notice it's still white here. Actually, no, okay, it'll change. You notice it's still white here, and the reason is because I've set the threshold on these to only trigger once that value goes over a certain grayscale value. So right now it's at 0.4 because I'm too far away. But as I come closer, you see that value goes lower because I've set it to something where I'm darker. So I know that I'm closer to the camera. And then as I back up, you see it's going to go back up because, again, I'm getting further away on the depth feed. So I apologize if this is like confusing or anything, but I think it's pretty cool. Uh-oh, we're getting bots in the chat. That's okay though. I think this is pretty cool. So like as you go back, it's only sampling that pixel. That's all you're looking at. And if you want, you can set up like a grid of pixels if you want something more consistent or you're worried. But I found that one pixel actually works fine. Like it seems very stable. But it's only as soon as I go over that pixel, you'll see that it triggers. And then I have to get a value dark enough to actually trigger the pixel and make something happen, which I think is around like 0.35 or something. Maybe just under 0.4. Yeah, I think it's just under 0.4, less than 0.4. So doing this, you can set up a pretty elaborate like hover-based display, like a hover-based interactive display. You can use these for tables, you can use these for monitors. Like if you want people to just come up to the monitor instead of a touch screen, it's like now a hover screen. You can just like hover your hand in places and then make it. This was really big during the pandemic when people didn't want to touch surfaces all the time in public. You can use the same kind of technology and build stuff here. You can also track like shapes on a table. I found is good. Like if you have like blocks and they're standing, anything that's standing above the height of the table, you can actually map where those blocks are moving in space by sampling a grid of pixels on the screen and seeing, okay, where is the higher value, where's the darker value that's closer to the camera. And this is, I would say easy, because this is a complicated network, right? Like there's a lot going on here. Basically the remainder of this network is basically to form a logic network, and there is a delay script on here too. So like, just to kind of show what that looks like. So the logic is, this is what's setting the threshold. So right now, you see the select. I said the bounds are 0.23 to 0.4. So yeah, so I didn't say before, but also if you get too close, if you're right up here, it doesn't work either. You have to be at the right distance, which is within that range. And that's just set. I could set it to be infinitely close or infinitely far away, but it's not practical. Basically, you can change the range you want to just by looking at the logic of values. So it's saying that anything within these bounds of 0.23 or 0.4 is going to trigger. And you see that represented by the one below. We're looking at the bottom one. You see that represented as a 1. It's binary, it's a switch. It's 0 or 1. And that's what we're changing with this logic operator right here. And then as soon as we have that, we just hold and we run a trigger, and that does something. In this case, I think this one highlights that this changes it from white to yellow. And that's basically all we're doing. And we can just do that in the square. We have the marker rec. You see that it's basically judged by the fill color as being mapped to the rollover color here. So we can just change the color, like on here, and it's just all it's feeding. And this is how you start thinking with Touch Designer, right? You're like, okay, and you can see that on there, right? We go from 2 to 1.5 because those are the values we've set. And there's a little bit of a delay. It's very cool. There's a little bit of a delay there to accommodate for, people to going boom. And then all that's done is just on a timer, like at the bottom here. Can I get both in? Yeah, so you see the timer runs, and I've set like a threshold. When it hits 1, then it triggers. Boom, boom. And that trigger 1 is what's causing the event to happen. Boom. So keep your eye down here on the trigger. That's what we're looking at. And it seems kind of messy, right? Like when you come into it, if you come into someone's project, it always seems a little messy, but just to show like what you can make. And then I have 2 different networks for each event. So they're basically doing the same thing for the most part. Like when this happens, you turn this yellow if enough time passes on hover, then you play an event, which in this case is either play a video or invert the color of the screen. So, good for testing, good for like a practical application. And like I said, again, this is very modular. I could just take the code, combine it into a container, and then basically only use those containers and hide all of this stuff. So again, Touch Designer, very cool. Very easy to make something like this, I think, comparative to something else, and it doesn't need that many parts. Like I said, as far as content goes, I have text, text operators. I have cubes. They're just rectangles. Put them on the screen, make sure I'm sampling the right pixels, the right screen space UVs, kind of pipe that through, and then make an event happen. In this case, play a video, initialize and start, and just say trigger 1, it's 1, play the video. If the timer goes back to 0, turn the video off. That's like all we're doing. Same thing for invert. If we hit the other video trigger, like it hits long enough, invert the colors. If not, go from back to 0. It's no longer inverted. So again, let's see. Whoop. Actually, I don't know if I think it's this one. Yeah, that's the one that's controlling it. So again, if the trigger hits 1, invert the color. If it doesn't, go down. 1, invert the color, go down. Invert the color, go down. So you kind of see like how it's working. Like I just pick out the parameters I want to change, out of my whole network, and basically just set them to trigger, when I have these events. And maybe this will give you a good idea of why chops are so important to work with, because chops are basically going to be your base logic inside of Touch Designer, where basically you're setting your logic statements via chops because it's very easy to turn them from 0 to 1. Touch Designer has kind of built them in as your logic nodes, as like your Boolean nodes when you're thinking about it. But you can also just write a script. Like, some people, the coders like out there, the programmers are looking at this and they're like, why don't I just write a script though? In some ways that is easier. It's just kind of a different way of thinking about it. What I will say is that I feel like Touch Designer frees up like your options and kind of how you think about things. Real fast, I want to check something. It just frees up your options and how you think about things, basically as you go. And you can kind of see it all laid out in front of you. And if people aren't as code-based, if they're more visual people, and you're creating visual content generally in Touch Designer, like some kind of visual thing, then you can kind of get a look at that, and kind of get it set up. So just wanted to showcase this. What else can I say about it? It didn't take that long to learn how to make, I guess, is something to say. It also is definitely not optimized as much as it could be. That is definitely true. Like I said, this was a learning project more so than something to be deployed. But now that I've done it, I can see many ways that I could improve it and make it better. We'll turn that off. will be done looking at my giant face and keep it to my small face. But anyways, this could be improved and made better, kind of it. And it's very easy to make something that's functional, even if it is a prototype. Like it's a very functional prototype. You take this and use it right now for something if I wanted. You also, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but you have your frame count live up at the top of the screen. Touch Designer is very reliable and runs at 60 frames a second almost all the time seamlessly. Kind of locked into 60 frames. If you start working too high, it's going to drop down. I have gotten it to go pretty low before if I'm doing something really intensive, but generally it is incredibly stable. Almost never crashes when it's running, and you can just kind of run it forever. If you are looking to deploy Touch Designer projects, the only thing is that you can't really package them as an executable. The get around for it is Touch Designer makes a program called Touch Player, which is kind of functions as your standalone executable, and you can just put that on your machine without basically installing the full Touch Designer suite, and you basically give it a file to look at, and then it executes that file, and you go from there. So it is light, and it can kind of stay on your computer. Let's turn that off. You can kind of stay on your computer without working super hard, but it does not bundle things out as executables. You do have to go through Touch Player, basically, to get things set up and running. Touch Designer is free. I guess I should say that with a caveat. So I don't know if I've talked too much about Touch Designer's place in the industry, but it's often used for things where resolutions are very large because you have no resolution limit inside of Touch Designer. You see I've set mine up here at 1280 by 720, but I could make, let's see, just grab a container real fast. I could make a container that was 40,000 by 300. And here's what that looks like when you look at it in perspective. I wonder if I can, we can make it, 3,000, give it a little more room. And then this is my screen size. This is my canvas I'm working on. I'm working on a screen that's 40,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels. And there isn't a limit. The limit is your computer, and can your computer handle it? Can your media server handle it? But basically, the only restriction on this is that if you do not have a paid license, Touch Designer locks you into 1280 by 720 as your default, which honestly is fine for most projects you want to do. That also may go up in the future as resolutions get higher. That's always been kind of the limit. And back then, that was pretty high, like when Touch Designer first came out. So if you need it for a large scale projection project or LCD screen project, please buy a license. But if you don't need it for that, you actually can use it really well out of the box. If you're learning it, all the features come with Touch Designer in the free version, and it's pretty great. It's great to play around with, and it gives you access to pretty much everything. It's just that resolution that's locked at a very reasonable degree. I've used it for all kinds of projection projects at the 1280 by 720, and it's been fine. Again, if clarity or fidelity is of the utmost importance, you would buy a license, but for learning, this is incredibly fine. It's really good. Okay, so I think that's the first project we're going to look at. Basically, a screen sampling, something to sample screen space UVs is basically what we're doing at a depth feed. You could also do this without the Connect. If you had a green screen behind you, rather than sample just the grayscale value, from 0 to 1, you could sample the RGB values. So I could sample, say my hand is going to be a little more red, than the value of the green screen behind me. So I could say whenever that R value, hits up because someone's in front of it, then you go. And then at that point, the only sensor I'm using is a webcam. I just need a camera of some kind, and it doesn't have to be a fancy or expensive depth camera. I'm doing the exact same thing, except I'm using a backdrop to take the depth component out of it instead of, doing it free without any depth camera. Depth cameras are fairly expensive. They're getting cheaper. They're not the same price as a high-end video camera. You can get an Intel RealSense for I don't know, $100, $200. I can't, not 100, but 150, 200 when they were out. Connectors are I think $400. It is more expensive. Not super feasible to go pick one up. But if you really want one for a project, if you really need to make something, depth cameras won't break your budget. And there are definitely cheaper depth sensors too. These are just the ones we've worked with. All right, so I'm gonna try a new project. That one went pretty well. Let's see if we can find something. This was pretty practical. We'll see if I can find something that's like visually cooler. I know I need to fix this one, but let's try this. I needed to fix this one because I was like a tired graduate student when I made this, and I did not put the image files in the correct directory. Let's see if we can do it without crashing. This is where you need to worry about Touch Designer crashing. When it is in a project, I have never ever seen Touch Designer crash. Like, I have never had Touch Designer crash on me when I'm running a project. When I'm switching to a new project, yeah, I've had it crash on me all the time. It does a bad job, like loading in a new project. Yeah, it looks like this is frozen. Let's just kill it and start again. Oops. Yeah, we'll just kill it. Womp womp. Bring back Touch Designer real fast. And then we'll open our new project. Okay. I am a big fan of Touch Designer, and it just makes, if you're interested in working with sensors, you see I've worked with the depth camera here, the Connective Zura. Touch Designer makes working with sensors very, very seamless. Like, it is crazy how visually, like how much visual response you'll get so quickly, and then how easy the like integrating them into your project is. They do a lot of the work for you across a huge variety of sensors. And if they don't, like, they have the tools so that you can make that integration happen. So, endless replicator. I think we're in the experiment. Let's see. Yep, let's try again. Endless replicator experiment. Hey, there we go. All right, so this does need to be fixed, but I knew it would. You can kind of see what we're going to get into in a second. But, so this project was inspired by an exhibition done by the libraries called Hall of Gifts, which was held in the Visualization Studio. And it's actually a super cool project. It's basically going back to, is this in here? Yeah, here's a replicator. So we just need to point it to the new file. Basically, this was going back to, if you were alive in the 90s, you probably remember a platform called GeoCities where you could make your own website. And this was super great because you got like basically a free hosted website, GeoCities website, that you could like point people to if you wanted them to. And they were peak 90s internet graphics. Basically, lots of GIFs, like lots of janky, low resolution, like badly transparency images. But as the internet moved forward, like these GIFs begin to go away because you can put video on a site, right? GIF collection, just that folder. Okay, select. Hey, there we go. So basically what you went through is you could find all these GIFs from the 90s taken from GeoCities sites done by the Internet Archive. And they were basically collected in one point. And so basically you're in this big 360 theater. And there's projectors going all around you. And just all around you are just these GIFs running. And it's very surreal. They aren't changed or animated. I mean, like they're animated in terms of like the GIFs moving. But basically, you just see these things, like Hello Kitty, with like the bad cropping on it. Oh, I love it. This Pikachu, tons of Pokemon GIFs around that time. It's just like also like a product of the 90s, like Street Fighter, Domo, Final Fantasy, all this stuff. Just like super basic GIFs. I think I have the dancing banana in here somewhere. Yeah, peanut butter jelly time, if you know that. I'm dating myself here, but now this should be working, I believe. Yeah, and then we'll kind of jump into it and I'll kind of talk through how this project works. So let's see it first. Oh, let me fill the screen. Hold on, I'm gonna jump back. We can get a better look if we fill this. So rather than a custom, let's hit fill. How's that looking? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is basically something I made in response to Hall of GIFs, and this gives you an idea how you can make like kind of a shader-based application. Over here, I have some controls. Let me make sure. There's a stream zone little delay. I want to make sure that it's coming up right. 1 second. Yeah, there we go. Wow, it's not centered though. Interesting. It is on my screen. I wonder if it's because the screen capture is small. You'll still get the idea though. On my end, it is centered. I don't think I want to troubleshoot it too much right now because we can adjust for that in a bit. But I basically made this suite of controls that are blocked out, I think, by my portrait from view. Also kind of where it's focusing. Let me see if I can set this as a custom resolution real fast. Let me just take a second. Opening size. It's gonna be hard though because I'll have to. I'll have to adjust it as I go. Monitor 0. I'm just going to leave it for now. I'll adjust it on the fly. I think you'll get the idea, even if it's not perfectly centered. This is just a stream wonkiness. But basically I've made a set of controls here so I can control the camera. And hopefully we can use this to kind of get us more to the side. So you can kind of fly around the space as you go. I want to try one thing real fast. I know. This is always the danger. I always want to make changes. But I think the layout, if we put it, because I think what it's doing is it's putting it to the left justified. Let's say fill. That's funny. Fixed width. So the left anchor is 0, the bottom anchor is 0. I think that's what it's coming from. It's just it's anchored to the wrong place. But again, I don't want to spend too long looking at it. I was just hoping I could. But anyway, we can talk through it. So we've got some controls here. So I can manipulate the camera position as you fly around. We can move around in space as we go. I can manipulate the speed of the system that we're working in. Oh wait, I've got an idea. Man, I'm sorry, I'm not thinking straight today. All we need to do is just put this in the background. Hold on. And then we'll close this. Oops, not maximize. This works actually. I just want to have my controls handy. I apologize. It's so like one of these presentations where you get oh, I want to show my cool thing, the way it was meant to be seen. But this will work. Okay. Let me just make sure that it looks right on the stream. I think it does. All right, cool. So we're in business. So basically, I have these control systems that I put up on here, and you can hide or show them as needed. You could also tie them to something else in space. I can move the camera around, so you can track the camera on the X and Y axis through space as you move through this kind of portal. You can increase the portal speed. You can go pretty fast. We'll slow it down a little bit. Big one, you can increase the count. This is another part. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but this is all being done real time. You can increase the jitter. So if you want the whole thing to shake around a lot, or not, you can increase how much it jitters. So let's slow it down, but make a big, slow it down even more. Make a real big amount, real big displacement. So you can kind of see how it's shifting around, and you can kind of whoa, we're dodging. If you get motion sick, I'm sorry. We can slow that down. We can also do a very small jitter amount, but a big speed. So let me slow this down even more. So you can see they're really vibrating, here. Turn that speed up real high, yeah. Or you just turn them off, which we'll do right now. You can change the size, as you go. So make this real big or really small. Make it really small, turn the count up really high. And then also we can take this and we can make it bigger or smaller. So we can make a real big portal, stretching so beyond they're not even packed anymore. It's kind of like a ring coming out. Or we can make the portal real small. Shrink it down like this. And you're kind of going through it. Or we can just keep going back and forth. And like I said, this is real time. So whatever change you make, you can kind of make these little rooms of GIFs. It's very funny. But you can mess with this, and all this is being updated in real time because, again, we're in Touch Designer. I don't know if you can see that frames per second up at the top, but it has not really dropped below 60 this entire time. I think it's hit 59 a few times. And we're populating this with like all these instance GIF. So this is like a cool example of a visual shader thing that you can make inside of Touch Designer. Cool, just making sure that I'm coming through. I'm gonna kind of pop back out and show how that works, now that we're working on it. Also, all right, so we're gonna jump in. Whoop, oh boy, that's a lot. Let's turn that off. All right, there we go. So this is kind of what the network looks like for this. And basically the two things that are really powering this entire thing, the ones that are really like responsible for everything that's going on, the first one is here, and we have a particle network, a particle system, I guess I should say. And basically all it's doing is just particles are coming out in a stream, and they're being blown by a force, in this case wind, on the z-axis towards us. So it looks like we're moving forwards into a stream, even though we're actually staying stationary. They're deforming some because they're being generated along these lines, so the lines are kind of moving in and out. So it's never perfectly just straight. If it was, it would look a little different. But here there's always a little bit of flexion in value because of the lines are moving. This particle system gets rendered, let's see, over here via geometry. We have a camera that basically we can control the position of, and that's how we are flying through space. Let's see, this is a slider, sorry, a camera here that we can control the position of via the slider, which is basically how we're moving through space. So all this is doing is moving the camera position around. And then the second thing that's really controlling everything, like how we're getting all these images, you'll notice they have no transparency here. So you can see the edges, like all the alpha edges, if the GIF has transparency. They get rendered out later here, we take them out. But basically is this thing called a replicator. And I put it in here as GIF application. And basically all this is doing is it's saying, hey, we have this one GIF that we're going to use as a template. What we're going to do is we're going to connect it up into this particle network, and we're going to output this as a table. So basically I go into my file structure, which is just full of GIFs. That's all it is. And I can basically pull that entire folder and use it all at once. And these are the kind of things that Touch Designer can automate that makes it really easy. That it's just like, okay, look at the folder, pull out everything that's in it and create a node based on the same thing. So I didn't have to place these by hand. All I had to do was run one template and a replicator. And then I can pull this information out and use it in my project. And how I do use it in the project is through something called instancing. So instancing is a real big strength of Touch Designer. It's very good if you're using it in most stuff. And basically what it's saying is that the GIF application / GIF is basically replacing each particle. So it's going to run through the entire folder structure, populating those particles as GIFs. And you can see that here is basically what it's doing. And then I export that as channel data, and then I can put that in and replace all my particles with these GIFs and kind of create this interesting graphical experience that I've instanced out all the particles as a texture. And in this case, a huge folder of textures, that are all coming at once. And then I've done some post-processing things like right here, like this looks weird. I'm kind of fading them in, but I've also been putting a black background and some fog. So it looks like we're moving through, space as we go through this kind of GIF zone. And it's just a cool example of a shader you could make. So you could like set your thing beforehand. I could also map, this camera position to like a joystick or a controller. Oof, hold on one second. Okay, we're going until 2:50, good. Sometimes I get caught up and I'm like, oh, did we end at 2? No, we've gone 17 minutes over. I'm glad we didn't. But basically you can manipulate around, and there are lots of visual cool things you can make like this inside of Touch Designer that I think would be difficult to make in other applications, is kind of the deal. So, is there anything else I want to talk about in here? It's more simple. Controls maybe. Touch Designer has a built-in control system. You see I'm using a lot of sliders and a lot of speed settings to kind of create my final here. Let me see if I can get this in a point you can see it. Looks like I'm kind of cropping a little bit at the bottom of the screen, so I'll put it up here. But basically I've got a camera control, which is like a 2-axis slider, and then a bunch of sliders for the speed, GIF count, jitter speed, jitter amount, GIF size, and portal size. And all these are just being controlled like so many things in Touch Designer, as just being controlled via a node, and they're just looking at them. So the slider, we can go, all these sliders you can go inside, and you'll see that we're referencing a value, kind of in here, and then we're doing a math thing. So to go from, we're taking basically the range from 0 to 1 and going from 1 to 2000. This is the number of GIFs coming through, the GIF count you can see down here. So basically, I go back, and then that is being piped into the particle system. Let's see if it's up here. Particles. Yeah, so the birth is now at 2000. And then if I drag that down, you'll see basically all I'm doing is manipulating it from another location. So it'd be the same thing if I just dragged it on here. I would break it, it's broken now. Like, that's very few. But it would be the same effect. And I can just Control Z it. But basically, I've normalized it to a much larger value from 100 to 2000, and then I have made it so it connects to the parameter I want to change. So just kind of an idea of how setting up a button or a GUI would work in Touch Designer. And normally what you would do is if I had two monitors, I would basically put my visualization on one monitor, and I'd put my whole GUI on the other, and then I could just control all the settings to whatever I'm projected to from my laptop or anything else that I need to use. Because I could also rig these settings up through OSC or UDP, Transport Protocol. I could control it with my phone, and Touch Designer makes this easy to do. I'd say relatively easy. There's a learning curve for sure. If you look at this, you're like, oh, what's going on? But I don't know. If you look at it, it starts to make sense, I feel like. All right, so I think let's take a look at one more project. This will take a little bit more setup. Let's see if we can do it without it crashing now that we're switching to another one. This one's called MIDI Visualizer. I will be the first to admit that this is a little more of an experiment than the others, but I thought it was cool, so I thought I would go ahead and show it. Let's see if we can get this to load. I think it might have crashed again. So, good thing to note. Don't use Touch Designer. Be careful when switching between Touch Designer applications. Real fast. Got a MIDI panel right here. The Akai MPK Mini. And we're going to use it as a series of inputs for our next example. So give me a second to get this set up. And I will say Touch Designer is used a lot in VJing. It's used a lot with things that are audio reactive. Deadmau5 has become a big Touch Designer evangelist, actually, and he has been making a lot of his visuals inside of Touch Designer himself for his shows. Okay, we're set up and ready to go. We have to kill this one because it is not responding. I swear Touch Designer is pretty solid. It's only the switching between projects where it really gets hung up. And honestly, if I stopped the timeline, it probably would have not crashed. All right, let's go ahead and load this in. So projects to stream. This one is going to be our MIDI visualizer. With MIDI and 3D texture. Akai. One more time. Okay. Whoop. Hold up. 1 second. I apologize for all the screen flashing. Okay, that'll be good. And the reason it's doing this is because we don't have our input set up yet, but I'm going to bring it in right now. So OP MIDI input. Later. Pause this for a second so we can get back to nice smooth. So you notice, I don't know if you can see, our FPS is dropping a little bit back here. Yeah, down to 17. You notice it gets choppy, and that's because Touch Designer is constantly running in real time. It is always doing this in real time. But you can get around that by just pausing the timeline. Just press spacebar or hit pause, and then you can go to where the problem is. And the problem in this case is I believe our MIDI map is not set up correctly. So let's go in here real fast. Basically what I've done is Touch Designer does support MIDI input, and I don't know if you can see this. Hold up, because I'm going to hold it in front of my face. But you have buttons, so we have all the buttons mapped on here. 1 to, I think, 25. Yeah, 25 keys. And then you have the pads that are mapped. You see you're getting those inputs. And you have the sliders that are also mapped. And then you can use all these values to control whatever you want inside of Touch Designer. So let's take a look here. See if I can troubleshoot why we're getting hung up on it. Let's hit play real fast. So it's coming through, but it's very, very slow. Oh, is that all I'm missing? Well, let's delete this. Is that it? All right, then we need to reference the movie file. Let me see if I've got it. If not, we'll just make a new one. That's kind of the beauty, as I made this in Touch Designer to start with. So we'll go to desktop, projects to stream. Oops. Oh wait, we don't want to open this. Oh, wait, hold on. One second, just navigating to see if I have it on me. Looks like I might not. So we'll make one. Let's do it right here on the fly. We'll use the Azure Connect because I'm using my webcam right now to stream. I think that might be why. That was why we were getting such a janky thing, was it was trying to go between my webcam that I'm using to stream right now, and then it was trying to use that same webcam as input, but we don't need that. So we're gonna make some input to go. So we'll say video device in. And then we're gonna see if I can use the Connect for this. Yeah, there we go. There I am on the Connect. Wow, nice camera. Good, looks good, okay. But anyway, and then we're gonna use another node called, what is it? Video device out, I believe. No, I actually don't think so. I think it's like a record. Hold on, it's not something I do super often, but I did do for this. Watch out, 1 second. Right, Braille sets remap. So like basically what I'm doing is that there is a built-in recorder inside of Touch Designer, so you can record all your content as you go. I just want to make sure I'm grabbing the right one. No, not a screen grab. Oh, I think it's just video device out, actually, if I'm right. No, I already did that one. Hold on. There's an easy way to figure this out. We're just going to go back to the past. Go back to when we had 17 frames a second. Movie file out. Got it. Okay. That's all we needed to do. So, video device in. Azure Connect. Hook it up to movie file out. And now let's record something. Let's see. So we are going to maybe do something big. That'll be cool. Subtle works too, but we'll do something big for this. So record. Off. All right. Now, we take a look. Oh, let's see where it spat it out real fast. Touch Designer movie out, projects to stream, video. I think I just put it in the folder. All right, movie file in. Okay. All right, so I apologize if this makes no sense. But basically what we did, we'll go back to it, is we recorded ourselves, the video device in, which we can turn off now. No reason to run them both at the same time. Save some bandwidth. Yeah, back to 60. And this is the video we made. Then we saved it as a texture 3D, which is basically texture information times time. So I basically took all the frames of that video and I saved them out to one big texture sheet. And now we're using this as a texture mapped to a material, which is being projected onto these individual squares. So why did I do all this? Well, because, actually, let's go back. Let's not use this perform. Let's just make it big. So we got a little bit of flickering here. Here we go. Okay. So turn this off. So now, if I hook up my MIDI visualizer to it, you'll see I have full video playback based on what key I'm playing. So I don't know if you can see this on here. Let me see if I can move it up. And then you can hit a chord. You can try hitting all the buttons at once and it should all respond. Just my hand's not big enough. But basically you can play as you go and you have your own array. And like right now this is a 5x5 because I have 25 keys, right? Each one corresponds to a key. But I could have this in any arrangement, right? Like this is just kind of an experimental thing. But basically now I can play video as I go, you know. And this could be any movie at all whatsoever. So, I can hold, let go. And I can kind of set the speed I want it to go to. Like I could add a really big delay to this if I want. Right now it's pretty fast. But all that is controllable inside of Touch Designer. If I wanted, I could set the color, you know, of me to all of them to like one of these sliders, and it'd be all controlled during MIDI. I could add a deformation effect to each of these pads, and every time I hit it, it would all deform across all of them. So just like to say, Touch Designer is really great with working at any kind of input, in this case, a MIDI controller. And then we'll just play something really fast for you. How does that look? Visualization of the year right here. 2023, the year just started and it's already over. Yeah, but you get the idea. And basically, we can take a step back now and kind of look at how that works. So we'll turn this off a little bit more. So, you know, it's not super complicated. We'll just kind of run through the steps from the start. So first thing is I did package my MIDI input into its own container, and I can just bring that in whenever I need. And basically what you have here, let's turn the playback on, is I have my MIDI mapped input device. I got one of the sliders still going. But basically, plug my MIDI in, kind of found it in the device table, mapped the inputs to basically channels. So I have 25 channels on the keys, 8 channels for sliders, 8 channels for pads. Let's see. Then I separated them out. So these are all my dials, these are all my keys, these are all my pads. And then from there, I can basically take any of them and turn them into an event. And then whenever they turn on, you'll see this is the kind of delay I have. So I can add it for longer. It shows what's indexed, and the index is important because basically this will collapse it down, and I can say, okay, so I'm playing the first key, or the 0, because computer science, the 24th key, 25th, you know, if you count for 1. And then I can merge all these down into different fields, so no matter which is playing, you'll get them. And you'll notice that we switch from 1 kind of going up. If there's a bunch of them pressed, actually we switch to this view, which is basically showing all the keys getting pressed at once. And if you look at this, I don't know if you can see here, but there's a value, I'm trying to hold the, based on what difference you are. So you have a ramp here from 0 to like 15, 17, you know, that I've been playing. If I hit 20, you know, we'll kind of go up to 25. And it's just basically, this is an index as a graph right on here. So the index is basically, okay, you're playing key 0 and key 25, and if I add more keys, you see we start adding more points, and they're going in the direction I press them. So we're plotting them on a line. So right now, let's start from the beginning. So I'm pressing key 0, key 25, so we go 0 to 25, and then next we're going to go sequentially to, let's say, key like 4, 5, and then we're going to go back down, you know, to hit that key, and then we're going to go up to key like 18, we're going to go back up, and then we're going to go down to like key 2. So what we're doing is we're just plotting the sequence that we've played these keys on this timeline, and then this is how the program knows, you know, like what buttons to press. It's going to look at the total timeline, and it's going to look at the time we press them in. And as soon as we add another one, it's going to factor that into our instancing. And again, we're using instancing in here. We're basically taking this channel information, combining all of it down into a shuffle. So same thing, timeline scrolling. So I can see all of them when they're pressed, and then it can slow them down. So that's how we kind of get that fade off. And you notice that comes from a lag that we set in here. So rather than, because we can just turn the lag off. Let's just bypass it. Well, that one. This one. So we've just bypassed the lag. Now it's either on or off. So what that looks like, if we come over here, so now we get no nice animation because there's no lag timing, just on or off. But if we turn our lag back on, go back over here, now we get this nice smooth interpolation between frames because we're just lagging, and then it gives you the values you can mess with. So it's a very short like on, but I can turn this down, right? Like I can go to like half a second lag, and then we could do like a 2 second lag off, and I can show you what this looks like. It's going to be very slow, but it'll give you an idea of how much lag affects like the final output. So we'll go here, just bring it up. So here's with a big lag. So you see. So now this is just basically controlling the speed my video goes. And honestly, I might not even get to the end, right? Like I have to like wait. Vroom, vroom. But it does look cool because you get more of that fade out effect. And I can actually make it extremely slow. Like I could turn it to something like 5 seconds, you know, instead. I don't know why I'm going back here. There's no reason to, it's already up. 5 seconds on the lag off. So try this real fast. And now you're gonna get this really long put down, which is good if you want like a lot of stuff happening on the screen and it like to stay that way. So you get this like real big fade effect. And then if you do the same one, it's always going to kind of snap back instantaneously. So I'm like on the way down, it's just going to go kind of where it goes. Because again, it's going down and back up. It's moving along that timeline. So it always looks very smooth because it's never, you know, going straight down or snapping up. It's always going up or down on the timeline from the lag. So you can make a lot of cool effects kind of just with messing with the time, you know, as you play stuff. And again, I say this as like, I say this a lot whenever I do a Touch Designer stream, but you know, this could be anything, right? Like I just made a recording of me doing something stupid, like right in front of the stream, because my original video just wasn't, you know, in the folder it should have been. But like that video was also recorded on the fly. I think it was just me like raising my hand, you know. But when you get like this big array, you know, and it's mapped to something like a keyboard, you can start making some pretty cool stuff. And then this could be audio reactive too. Like I could just set this to a song's waveform, you know, same kind of thing. I could take the range of the waveform, I could normalize it between 0 and 25, because that's what I have right now, 25 instances. Or I could make way more instances, right? Like I can make 50 of these and then normalize between 0 and 50, and then basically get the exact same thing. Anything else to run through? So your lag, your limit. Limit's important because otherwise you get some funky things. Basically, I'm just limiting so it's not ever resetting to 0 or 99, because then you get this weird blur, right? Because it's trying to blur between the last frame of the video and then the first frame, because it's looping. But you don't want that blur, so you limit it. So you just build in this, and then you get nice, seamless, not blurry video. Shuffle is important. Like I said, shuffle is just basically the stuff that combines all these channels down into one. And the reason that that is important, as we'll jump over to instancing, is that if you ever instance anything, you're going to need to only put one operator in there with like only one set of channel. So you can shuffle any amount of channels down. Like I could have 10,000 channels that are all combined down into one via the shuffle chop. But it is important if I want to build it, because I can only reference one channel in here. Like you'll see there's a bunch. No, I think there's just the one because I shuffled them down. But like basically you would see every single channel when I go to the pull down. So I'm referencing null 6, but since they're shuffled down, I only see the one channel. And you can only reference one channel at a time. But again, you can always shuffle those channels down, no matter how many you have, into one if you need to, which is what I've done here. Things here, these are just the shapes I'm using. I have a grid. The grid has to be the same number of samples I have. I have 25 keys. If I turn that to anything else, it breaks. And the reason is because I have 25 keys, 25 chop samples coming in, 25 channels coming in. I need to make sure they're mapped 1 to 1 so it knows which ones to go for. Because if it was like I had 30, you know, it wouldn't know which channels to pair with which parts on the grid. So 5 by 5, 25 total rectangles, 25 total channels. Just something to keep in your mind. And you can always resample this. Like I could take my 25 keys and resample them to 30. We can do that right now, honestly. So 6, oh, it broke. But referencing null 6, what if we put in a resample? Just to show what this would look like. It's going to be a little weird because I don't have the same amount of keys, but I'll take it from the limit. I think actually these need to be reversed. This needs to be here. Resample. Off. Yeah, there we go. So I could say, I think I want either a new rate, new interval, or a same rate, new interval. Let's try this. No, not there. Let's see real fast. I'll try this from seconds to frames. My apologies. I don't want to get into it in random, but I could basically, is it resample? Maybe I'm even grabbing the wrong one. Sorry. Obviously, this is something I don't do that often. Might be a reorder. No. But you basically can adjust the sample rate to whatever you need. So my sample rate now is 0 to 25 in terms of like the chops. I could sample that down to something smaller and basically fit it onto the list. But again, I don't think you guys need to watch me kind of flounder around with it. I can guys change it back. So again, just adjust the grid. 5 by 5 pops back up because your channels and your points match up, whatever you're instancing on. So cool. 1 second. I have a few more minutes to talk. I think 10 minutes maybe left to talk. So we can talk a little bit more about just like what I like in Touch Designer, things that are going well. We can kind of switch back to I think a new blank canvas. Whoops. Maybe I can just do some stuff on the fly real fast. But I really just wanted to. No, we can quit. But I really just wanted to show you some cool things that I had made with Touch Designer, kind of give you an idea of what kind of projects were possible inside of Touch Designer, kind of show you how they worked, and maybe we'll do like a directed project together next time we do one of these Touch Designer streams. But again, I just want to show some more complex, more interactive projects and kind of show what went into making them. So real fast, if we're hanging out here, I could kind of talk about how I build like a more interesting or more reactive. Uh-oh, I might have froze myself. 1 second, let me check OBS. Stream is good. Why is my audio input capture not working? 1 second. Sorry, not audio, video. Oh, I'm back. At least I caught it. All right. 1 sec. All right, so I think I'm back up and running. I can kind of show it real fast. Might have been a weird thing about like how the camera works. Touch Designer is pulling a lot of cameras. Like as it works, it might have tried to steal. It might have tried to steal my webcam out from under me when I was doing it. So hopefully I haven't been frozen for too long. Okay. So real fast. Just if I was going to build something in Touch Designer, we'll say something more graphics based. So I've got a noise function. Let's see. Hey, how's it going? I'm streaming, Mitchell. What are you doing?
Just hanging out.
I was like, get out of here.
Huh?
Get out of here.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm not upset. It's good to see you, by the way.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Mitchell's one of our student employees in the VR studio.
Yeah. Didn't have anywhere else to be.
No, I gotcha. So just putting the noise up in here. And let's see, we want to modify it. First thing about noise is that almost always if you want to do some cool like motion stuff, you want to animate it. And the easiest way to animate anything is with just a little script. ABS time dot seconds. It's worth memorizing for sure if you're doing anything in Touch Designer, even if you're staying away from the code. Do memorize that script because it's going to make a lot of things move. You can like make it with like constants and like adding to it, but yeah, I mean, just memorize the script. It's just easier. So we have a noise. Like, yeah, what do we want to make out of this? Kind of going on the fly. We could do some feedback stuff. Feedback is always fun. I'm gonna put a null in here. Nulls are kind of, I don't even know what a null is equal to, but a null is basically something with no changes on it. It's basically just an empty node. And the reason this is important is because if you want to change anything, like between here and here, you can basically make the change here and you don't have to like rewire your whole network. So nulls are very important for that. Okay, we're gonna multiply those. Not multiply, let's do a composite. We might want to use some more interesting blending stuff. And then we're going to target top, comp 1, pulls that, and then we need to pull this down here. We'll take a null, because we're going to composite it over itself. Ooh. Maybe to multiply. Or a top, or over. I think a top. Let me make sure I pull so real fast. No, this looks like nothing. Ooh, yeah, see here? Now we're getting stuff. So not add. I wonder if these are eventually going to go away. Let's see. Let's try over. Interesting. And then we're going to insert a transform. And we're going to change, well, not transform, sorry. A levels. A level. Okay. So post. Opacity, turn that down. Yeah, there we go. Just gone. Turn that way up. Okay. Then we'll pulse that again. Take it down a little bit. There we go. Gone. Okay, and then we'll hook up an LFO. Put it to a math. LFO is a low frequency operator. So back and forth. But we're going to remap this. And we don't want a sine, we want a pulse. Yep. And then we want to take this and actually I don't think we need anything else. We'll just say null. And then we're going to hook this pulse to operator null 3. You can also do this more easily. I guess I should say I'm used to typing the commands in because it's good practice. But I can put it here. And then basically, I can hit this and just drag it over, and you don't have to type the whole thing out. But that's not what I want to do right now. Hit reset pulse is what I want. Okay. Drag this to the wrong place. So what I want is to grab this, drag it here, chop reference. There we go. Cool. So we have this set up and running. see that every time I hit this, we're going to pulse and change it. Then let's see if I have enough time to do this. Rectangle. Maybe a grid. Let's do a grid instead. Grid. Similar, but this is easier to work with. Set this to 200. This to 200. Then we need a material. Maybe this is the phone. The geometry. Well, I don't know if we're gonna make it, but we're gonna try it. This is coding fast. So basically, what I want to do is I want to use this comp to modify a height map on a piece of geometry. Let's take this to a null. I have 2 minutes to get it to you. Let's see if we make it. I might not make it, but that's okay. Geometry. You got that, you need a camera. Say a light. And then we need our render. Because we're turning something 3D and making it 2D, so you need to render the image. Okay, and then we need to set this to here. We need to say it's a material parameter. And then we need to modify our material. Sure, I might not have the right one. Normal map, bump map. I need a height. Because normal's not bad, but I really want. Let me try the PBR real fast. Rubber. Oh, we're still on time. Normal, metallic. You can do it with a normal map, it'll work. Won't be as cool, but it'll still look neat. Okay, so I'm gonna set this as a null. And we're gonna run this into normal map, null 5. But we're gonna change this, I think, back to a phone. If we're not gonna use a height map. Bulk map. Throw it in there. Perfect. I use tangent attributes. Oh, all right, we're going a little over, but it's fine. I want to get there. Attribute create, I think. Okay, let's get ready to move this light and camera around. So we're gonna zoom in a little bit. And let's move the light. This is real off the cuff, but oh, here we go. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, well, I was hoping to get this placement up and running, but there's only so much you can do. All right, I think we'll stop and call it there. Usually what I would want to do is like deform it, you know, like push it up face as go, so you have this like landscape effect and it keeps like changing every flicker. But I just want to make sure that I get the deformation in right. I think it's just in deform. SOP with capture data, yeah. But we're just going to leave it here. Because again, I don't want to get too in depth. I'm going to get caught up in it. Thank you for all for tuning in. If you stopped by for the stream and you've done the whole thing. If you're watching this after the fact, my name is Ian Boyd. I work at NCSU Libraries in the VR department and the Learning Spaces and Services department and teaching spaces. And love talking about Touch Designer, love applying it to other stuff. So if you ever have any questions, you can just look me up, Ian Boyd, NCSU Libraries. Shoot me an email. My email address is online. And I'd love to talk Touch Designer with you. And if you have stuff that like I'm obviously doing wrong and should change, please let me know as well, because I'm always trying to learn, and I think it's a pretty cool program that I just want to get better at. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll see you next time I do one of these streams. It might be different. very cool product called cables.gl dropped that I've been getting into, which is basically like Touch Designer for the web. Same kind of node-based coding environment and language, but should be pretty cool. So I may look into that too.